All right, welcome to COD's AMS meeting. I am President Sam Augustin. We are going to have a talk today between Gino and Paul Servatka about tornado warnings and how warnings are issued across the country. The way that warnings are issued are kind of out of date and everything. And June 21st of 2011 sparked a pretty good debate on COD forecasts. So we figured to bring the person who issued the warnings that day, Gino Izzi, and Paul Servatka, who totally agree with how warnings were issued that day. So I will let them have it and let the debate begin. So.
Thanks, Sam.
Yep.
Well, okay, welcome everybody. I'd like to extend a special welcome to a bunch of people from NIU that came out here. Walker, welcome to our new places. You'll be teaching here. You got to come and see our lab over on the other side. Gino, thanks for coming out. Actually, we set this up as a debate, and when we say it's going to be a debate, this is not quite climate debate. It's going to be more good-natured because we actually agree on most things. But the event that happened set some things into motion that, well, it kind of shows the weakness of the system. And so because I'm just a lonely college professor, I don't have any political ties, I'm going to speak my mind completely freely tonight. And I don't really care what people think. But my goal ultimately is to, especially for some of the students, is to get you thinking about new ideas so that maybe you can go out there and start changing the way the system works. And I'll give you reason for why I believe this. And I'm gonna make some statements that I may not even believe if I think about it long enough. But I hope that by the end of tonight, you guys will all be participating, giving your ideas and talking about this and really making it a good discussion. We are going to be streaming this, so hopefully if anybody's not here and wants to see it, you can show it to them. We'll have it up on our site later on. So we'll start with Gino, who's going to talk a little bit about what happened on that event, and we'll try to get this on the screen first of all. Okay. Give us about 3 seconds.
And unlike Paul, I'm not a lowly college professor who is free to speak his mind. I was coached and reminded before I came here that I'm a representative of the National Weather Service. I am going to do my best to be a little bit more filtered than usual and maybe even a little more political than usual. So this might not be as fun as you had hoped, unfortunately.
Oh.
We'll see.
You're going to be more political? I know you.
I know you. Told I should do. We'll see how that works. Hopefully the boss doesn't know this is being streamed live, and so I'll be okay. And I haven't seen him walk in yet, so I was half expecting him to have an agent here. So I have forgotten about this case and hadn't looked at it. And well, I've looked at like 5 minutes of radar and glanced at mesoanalysis stuff and kind of remember. I basically remember what happened, sort of. So bear with me. I really didn't prepare to kind of talk about it. Decent instability this day. Shear, good deep layer shear, modest, not great, low level shear. A big blob of convective, messy storms. See, this is the new political me. That's not even that word that first came to mind. So a bunch of storms out to the west. I do recall, and we don't have the data going back here, but I remember there was actually a decent meso with like a sloppy looking HP hybrid piece of storm north of Lincoln a little bit years back. I do remember having pretty good rotation, and that was the kind of first thing that kind of keyed me in this day that, this stuff's going to start to spin a little bit. So going into this, as I recall, little HP type transition occurred here with, was it Bureau County, I believe, going into western Livingston County. So you get a little couplet that kind of formed. If you look at the reflectivity, it's a big sloppy piece of storm. You could kind of make an argument for a little bit of structure, but I really wouldn't. It really is just a big blob of mess. But there's certainly some rotation in there. I wouldn't call it the most incredible meso in the world, but it's not bad looking. I guess going into this, I'll set the stage a little bit, and I can't remember exactly how many, but up to this point, our office had missed countless tornadoes so far this year, squall line stuff that going back on radar data, you couldn't see anything at all, including an EF2 tornado in northwest Indiana with no radar signature. So to say there was a level of frustration with tornadoes and squall line tornadoes is a probably an understatement. So anyway, I don't remember exactly when, but I believe I did tour this here going into Livingston and LaSalle County. Kind of gusted out, turned into a big blob of mush. Then as we get further northeast, basically you see a lot of weak but little transient type circulations, or I guess you could call them mesovortices, kind of forming along the leading edge of this sloppy looking bow. I mean, to be honest with you, this is not it's a sloppy looking bow, to be honest. It's not fantastic. The reflectivity gradient is okay. There's nothing about this that screams the most impressive storm we've seen, or really the most impressive bow we've seen. At some point, as this was getting, I believe, into this area here, we started to see a better rotation kind of develop along the northern edge. Where was that? Ah, here it is. So you get another little couplet. Again, it's nothing fantastic, but you start to get this couplet here, another weak mesovortice here, and then the beginnings of another mesovortice down here. So at this point, actually, there's no huge rush on time or anything? Okay. I don't have the warning, so I don't, oh wait, you can't load, no, you can't. I'm kind of curious at what point I issued the warning, so I'll sneak in and grab that real quick.
What, the big tornado warning?
Yeah.
I think it was 7:20. 7:40. It was before 8.
Yeah, not far before 8.
So we'll grab it because I'm kind of curious myself. And this was June.
Yeah, as I recall, as far as the setup for that night is we were kind of thinking that this was exactly what it's going to be like. The shear was decent, but the linear forcing was so overwhelming that it was going to quickly become a squall line. What did SPC have tornado probs? 5% maybe that day? So they weren't, it wasn't a high-level tornado threat.
Here it is. Looks like 757. So go back. So yeah, okay, this is what, 753. So it was this rotation here that started to develop that got my attention. So you had, let's see, this guy here, this little mesovortice, another little mesovortice forming down here. And as I recall, I just basically drew a large box to encompass the line. Yeah. So drew the box here. Basically, at this point, there's multiple little circulations forming. None of them are lasting a particularly long time. I can't recall if we had a report of damage or a tornado with Livingston County. I really don't recall. But basically, the reason the idea behind this boxology was you could do one large severe and then chase every one of these mesovortices that form, but they're lasting, 1, 2, 3, at most 4 volume scans. So they're not lasting a long time, so you'd be putting out multiple small warnings for small areas. And that gets really complicated and really messy when you start to have multiple tornado warnings for one county. It becomes really difficult for follow-up statements and just workload at the office. It also becomes challenging for NOAA Weather Radio trying to keep up with 5 different tornado warnings for one area. So that was actually, and there's a lot of discussion about the best way to handle it. That's kind of the best practice that some of the people who are doing a lot of research on the squall line tornadoes are suggested, is just handling it with that and mentioning multiple brief tornadoes. The thing is with these is you don't know when the tornado is going to occur. A lot of times it occurs in between volume scans of these. So there's one case that comes to mind is the New Year's Eve, New Year's Day case down in St. Louis, where it was funny, this was before our event happened here. I was watching the case from home because my buddy's the boss of that office down there. And one of my friends who was working radar, he issued a tornado warning that was about, probably about approximately as large, maybe not larger than that. And I was maybe a little bit critical of that warning when I first saw it. I was like, my God, what are you you just cover the whole bleeping thing with it? And yeah, it was pretty interesting. So sure enough, 2 volume scans later, and our intern happened to be there, and he was asking about it, what would you do it this way? How would you do it? And I was like, I wouldn't do that. That's ridiculous. And watching that, 2 or 3 volume scans after he issued the tornado warning, the circulation went from nothing to like 120 knots of gate-to-gate shear in between volume scans, and by that point, F3 tornado had already touched down. So that was certainly the high-end extreme case for these squall lines, but I guess the moral of the story is we really don't know when it's going to tour, when it's not going to tour, whether it's going to, how bad it's going to be. The environment, like I said, was not fantastic for it, but again, you see several small circulations along the leading edge of this. As I recall, another one developed in DuPage County where we had the brief tornado here in, was it near Downers Grove? And actually the rotation on both of these looked a little better on the terminal Doppler.
Yeah.
And then what was the one in north, I can't even remember the city we went into in northeast DuPage.
Well, the tornado went through Downers Grove, but there was a damage path that went all the way up through Elmhurst. That's as far as we went.
Where was the other tornado?
And then the other one was
Heights or?
Arlington Heights, I think, yeah.
Okay, I really can't remember.
It happened, my entire family. My sister lives in Downers Grove, about a half a mile from the tornado. My brother lived about another half a mile in Arlington Heights. So it was after my family is pretty much what I was saying.
As I recall, this day was also another thing that was, another challenge this day was actually, at some point in time, actually I think it was in this time frame here, we're getting numerous reports of wind damage with this down here, the area of rain. So there was a very active debate going on in the office as to A, what was going on, B, if the reports were legit, and C, how to handle it. So we were going back and forth about, do we issue a high wind warning for this? But then, well, it's kind of convective, even though it's not technically I don't know. We had a lot of discussion about that, and we had a lot of questions about whether the reports are even real. As I recall, there were a couple of mesonet sites or little school weather bug sites down here that were getting reports of like 50 to 60 mile an hour winds, and we were getting spotter reports of 70 mile an hour winds in Iroquois County. And I think at some point in time I ended up issuing a severe for that as well. But as that lifted northward, it started interacting with this blob of crud out to the west, and everything really became messy. But if you look at the velocity, you can see some pretty good inbounds from the south with that. And then as it gets up in the metro area, you see some also good outbounds once it gets north of the radar here. The whole thing became very it's typical Chicago convection, just a big mess. So, is there anything anybody wanted to see or questions about the radar or thought process?
Well, let's put this into perspective, because this is where the debate really plays itself out. From a meteorological standpoint, which is really what Gino's, I think, primarily thinking, is, well, gosh, I know what kind of weather comes from a line like this. You start with damaging winds and these little mesovortices that form on it that may produce little weak tornadoes, EF0, EF1 tornadoes. On rare occasions, in certain circumstances, maybe an EF2, EF3. They're usually not long-lasting, but they're difficult to pinpoint. He talked about them in between volume scans. So putting out a tornado warning seemed to be the logical choice. That's what it was. That was the high-end severe. At the College of DuPage, we are a storm-ready institution, and I know that Gilbert Sebensti at NIU did a lot of work in making Northern one of the first were you the first university to do it? So it's amazing, and we took Gilbert's lead and said, well, we're going to do the same thing here. And as part of that storm-ready plan, we have to say, what are we going to do? Well, living in Northern Illinois, we do not want to have people going to shelter every time there's a severe thunderstorm warning. Some of you know my ideas that the severe thunderstorm warnings that we have are kind of lame. I don't need to have people seeking shelter when we have 1-inch hail or a wind gust to 55 miles an hour. We don't need to be seeking shelter, disrupting class. So we worked really hard to say, all right, we're going to upgrade the threat limit to 70 mile per hour winds, golf ball or bigger hail, and we'll send people to shelter. But when there's a tornado warning, we have to go to shelter. So here it comes at 7:53, and Gino issues this big tornado warning. Well, that automatically kicks into gear everything that we have to do here. So the sirens go off, and everybody in the middle of the evening classes is sent to shelter. The problem is, how long was your warning? An hour 20?
Let's see. No, actually, according to this, it was 44 minutes? 42 minutes. No, am I doing, why can't I do math?
No.
42 minutes.
It was longer. And if you look, I mean, think about where if you go back to that warning, oh, you got it here?
Yeah. Weird. I wonder why it said, maybe I canceled it early and that picked up on that there.
So we had no choice. It was a tornado warning. We have an automated system. That's what emergency management has to do. We can't sit there and let people who have no idea what's going on decide. We have to have a binary system, yes, no. Tornado warning, go to shelter. Well, we come out there, look at where the warning is, right? It's way, I mean, DuPage County's way over there. So the warning goes off, I'm like, oh crap, well, I'm not gonna do anything, because we've been playing with the warnings here, and I wasn't even gonna call in there. I was gonna wait about 20 minutes before I called to see what was going on. Of course, I did call, and they're like, oh yeah, we got the warning, send everybody to shelter. Oh crap. Okay, so I live fairly close, and I took the time and I drove out here, and there's lightning flickering out in the southwest, and we still have at least 35, 40 minutes before the line even comes close to us. Now there's no tornado in this. You understand that. There's not like there's going to be a tornado coming for us. It's just a big line where a tornado could be anywhere for a moment here or there. So meanwhile, we have, I don't know, 8,000, 9,000 people sitting in staircases across the campus in these awful bathrooms for over an hour. Actually, they were in there for about an hour and 40 minutes because their all clear concept was a little bit confusing. So I was like, are you guys out of it yet? I told you to go. Oh yeah, I'm sorry. You know, so I'm calling and checking this out. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, these people are complaining they've been sitting in a shelter because of this huge tornado warning. And everybody's saying, well, where was the tornado? There wasn't even storms out here. So from my perspective, I said, wow, you can't issue a tornado warning. That's too much. It's too much lead time. You're asking people to do too much. From a meteorological standpoint, I agree with Gino. That was the right call if I wanted just to be a meteorological scientist. But from a person who's concerned about seeking or having people seek shelter, from an emergency management standpoint, from people at hospitals, this is a big deal. Now people always say, well, gosh, don't you want a good lead time? I remember that was some of the discussion, John, you were talking. Well, look at the lead time. Yes, if I had 40 minutes lead time before an F5 is coming through, then I would say, well, great. But this wasn't. This was just a line of storms with some damaging winds. So I had a hard time with that huge warning from a non-meteorological standpoint. And I think there's a problem because I don't think there's anything that you did wrong. I think it's inherent to the system of what we're doing. And that's kind of what I want to talk about. Is there anything else you want to say? I'm going to go into my PowerPoint.
Oh, no.
And then we'll let you go into that. So here, let me close this down. Here's what I'm thinking. Again, I'm just making this stuff up. Let me give you a little bit of history. Because some of you who are new students, at least even for me, you think this has always been the case. This is just the way things are, and it's good this way and it should never change. But the reality is not true. The first tornado forecast was developed by an Army Corps engineer back in 1888. Back in the 1880s, they started coming up with derechos, and they had some really cool ideas of tornadoes. But the Army Corps banned the word. For over 40 years, the word tornado was not allowed to be in any forecast. The Weather Bureau, as it was called back then, oftentimes would say, you can't predict tornadoes. The media would report, you can't predict tornadoes. They're unpredictable, so you can't say anything. And the newspaper should never talk about them because you can't predict them. You can't know anything about it. There's a lot of people who were given some ideas that maybe we could come up with something. This guy, Sergeant Finley, is really interesting. He had 15 forecast tools for forecasting tornadoes. And when you look at it now, it's kind of lame, but he had some insight for 1888. In 1943, that's the first time that experimental forecasts were given permission to issue a forecast that used the word tornado. It was still forbidden to mention any exact locations. So in other words, they were really looking at the synoptic scale setup and saying, hey, tornadoes are possible today throughout central United States. That was good. Then the people who really took tornado forecasting to new places, very famous names, and if you're a student in meteorology, you ought to know these names, Fawbush and Miller. Some of the stuff that Captain Miller did is still amazing. When we do our storm chase analysis and we do the upper level maps and the composites, that's all based on work that Miller did in pattern recognition. So this was really big. And they were the first ones to issue a tornado warning for Tinker Air Force Base in 1948. There was a tornado that hit Tinker on a Tuesday. 5 days later, they looked and they said, gosh, this looks like the same pattern. Really would have been fun to chase that time. Looks like the same pattern. So we're going to issue a kind of a forecast calling for tornadoes. And as it turned out, Tinker Air Force Base was hit again 5 days later, but this time they were prepared for it. So from that, they started developing more techniques. Now, you all know the Storm Prediction Center. For some of us old-timers, I still call it CELS. Did CELS issue a watch? Blah, blah, blah. CELS was the Severe Local Storms Unit of the National Severe Storms Forecast Center, which was out of Kansas City, Missouri. And they were developing ideas and concepts, and they started issuing these things called watches, starting from the Techniques Development Unit, the TDU, still in today. In 1950, they finally lifted the ban on the word tornado in forecasts. They did start using the word tornado in some of the warnings, because they could put out a tornado warning based on what, though, guys? Based on reports. Right? There's no remote sensing tools. We did an analysis and go, oh, I hear there's a storm off in the distance, and somebody reports a tornado, they get it. Now, the 1950s saw the development of satellite come into play. It's got the first WSR 57s started to come in toward the late 50s. In 1953, there was actually a tornado warning conference, or several sets of conferences in Texas, to talk about best practices for issuing warnings. Now, the reason I give you this history is quite simple. What we do now for watches and warnings primarily is based on what they knew in 1953. We haven't changed it. We still issue tornado watches. We still issue tornado warnings based on a model and the understanding of a 1950s science. Okay, let's go a little bit further in time now. Big outbreak. This picture here, one of my favorite pictures. When I was a kid growing up, I don't know, I would have dreams about this picture. Twin tornadoes through Elkhart, Indiana. And there's a pesticide sign here. You remember this one? How many of you have seen this picture before? This was like, I love this picture. This is so cool. And this major event, they started after this, they started replacing the forecast with tornado watches. And it's from here that they started to question. The people did. You know, anybody who's been around meteorology knows, what's the difference between a watch and a warning? And for those of you who are majors, you probably are saying, gosh, people don't know that, but it's one of the more common questions. You know what the other common question is from bad reporters? What's the difference between a tornado and a hurricane? I mean, I get asked that all the time. I have to be really patient with them. Did you know that back in the 60s and 70s, there was an intermediate step between a watch and a warning called a tornado alert? So they had all these different things: tornado watch, tornado alert, tornado warning. So what I've said kind of now is if our radar was replaced, the 57s were replaced by the 98D, or 88D, and we called it NEXRAD, I think we need a NEXWARN, the next generation weather warnings. And we need to build it on concepts of what we know about tornadoes today that we didn't know 50 years ago. I mean, think about it. The first Hook Echo, we just celebrated that a couple of years ago, the 50th anniversary of the first successful tornado warning. The Hook Echo, first one, anybody know where the first Hook Echo was reported?
Yeah, Illinois State Water Service.
That's right. They saw, hey, there's a storm with this funny appendage on it, and they're getting a report of a tornado. So yay to Illinois, one of the chill radars. And think about it. If you're issuing warnings based on Hook Echoes, that's the way we used to think. Supercells produce tornadoes. Everything else was just wind damage. And that's not what's happening. So our science, our technologies really changed, and I think we have to start shifting our paradigm on what we should be reporting. Here's the problem. Severe thunderstorm warnings, tornado warnings are all the same. I mean, really, oh, there's a severe thunderstorm, put out a severe thunderstorm warning. Are you telling me that an inch in diameter hail, as compared to softball hail, should get the same report? I know that they put in the body of it somewhere down the line, hail to the size of softballs, but it's still just a severe thunderstorm warning to most people. Winds greater than 50 knots, compared to what? Some of these huge storms, Derechos, what's the one that knocks down all the trees? Packwash storm. Are you telling me that the winds that are gusting to 50 and knock some small branches are like trees being knocked down by acres? A brief EF0 tornado? I mean, I used to criticize this, and now I realize, no, it's probably all there. You get a trampoline flying through somebody's window in Bolingbrook, and the Weather Service issues a tornado warning for this really questionable storm, and yet it's probably there. And then you get Plainfield, and you get the same thing for both storms, tornado warning. Now recently, what's the Weather Service been doing? Oh, let's call it a tornado emergency.
Or we really mean it this time.
We really mean it. Everything else is kind of false. Right? And do you understand the reason the people in the Weather Service do this is because they feel like there needs to be something stronger than just a tornado warning. Now, if your house was being hit, it really doesn't matter. It's an emergency for you. All right, so the fact that our warnings cover this entire spectrum of threat, and they all say the same thing, in my opinion, is unacceptable. I've talked throughout many, many years of teaching, of training spotters, of working with emergency managers. I hear this a lot. I only care about tornado warnings. If you go look at the report that came out of Plainfield, John Coleman was one of these people who talked about it. People don't pay attention to severe thunderstorm warnings, only tornado warnings. So there's an apathy to severe thunderstorm warnings. And so what does the Weather Service do? I'm not saying you did, Gino, but I'm saying the Weather Service does this all the time. Oh, that's a really strong line. I'm going to put out a tornado warning. I remember talking to Al Mollard out in Fort Worth. Yeah, we put out a tornado warning. It's a big line, winds to 100, 110 miles an hour. It's going to do tornado-like damage. I'm putting out a tornado warning. Now, meteorologically, scientifically, was that a tornadic storm? No. So why did they call it a tornado warning? Because they know deep down in their heart that no matter how we try to teach the public, no matter how much somebody like Gilbert says, oh, everybody should know about weather radio, the public doesn't know about this. They just see severe thunderstorm warning, tornado warning, oh, bad. So that's why the Weather Service issues that when they shouldn't be. It's not a tornado warning. Take a look at this. Here's a couple of storms. Anybody recognize this upper right derecho? I believe this is Spencer, South Dakota. Spencer, South Dakota got hit by a very strong tornado. It totally devastated the town. And then it became a bow echo that cruised across, and those are all the severe reports. That is a significant derecho, over $1 billion of damage overnight. Here's a big one that went into Kentucky. Here's just the leading edge squall line. The primary threat, all those crosses are wind damage. It's a big threat. Now, do you think maybe within there might have been little tornadoes? Sure, because we know about this now. In fact, I want to kind of pose this idea. This last year at the Bow Echo workshop, I talked to Morris Weisman. I said, where did QLCS come from? So it's been a question that's been bothering me. Those of you, do you know what an LEWP is? Line echo wave pattern. What's the difference between a QLCS and a line echo wave pattern? I asked Ron Przybalinsky this, Mr. Bow Echo himself. And he kind of looked at me and I'm like, aren't they sort of the same thing? He goes, yeah, I guess so. See, I don't mean this badly, but I think operational meteorologists aren't as concerned about the actual definition of something. They just use words because they're doing something with it. So no one's formalized what these things are. Morris came up with this QLCS, and I guess it was like in a paper in the late 1990s, 1998, I think he said it was. That's the first time they used this in just a quasi-linear convective system. They just kind of played around with it. And now, in the last 5 years, everything's QLCS tornadoes. There is no way back in 1950 that anybody knew what a QLCS tornado was. They didn't think about it in those terms. And now we are. So rather than finding an isolated supercell, now we've got this line of storms putting down tornadoes. In fact, I'm just going to, for a second, turn off the light here. Because as far as I know, as far as I've found, and if somebody can find something different, I just die for it. I don't know if I've ever seen a picture of a QLCS tornado. This might be what this to me in my mind, in my conceptual mind, said this is probably what it looks like. This was a picture taken by somebody in Australia. How many QLCS tornadoes have you seen in the last several years? Tons. You ever seen a picture of one? I've never seen a picture of one. In fact, I would like to argue, I don't even think Downers Grove was a tornado last year. I don't think it was. I mean, did it do tornado damage? Yes. Was it a clearly defined path? Yes. Was there rotation in it? Yes. Was it on radar? Yes. Was it a tornado? I don't know. What's a tornado? I mean, it's a big sucky thing, right? Was it associated with the updraft? Could you get a vortex within the downdraft of a thunderstorm? Can you spin as air is descending? How much does it have to go up? Is it actually at the cloud base? Is it on the leading edge? I don't know these answers. Do you know these answers? So we've never seen pictures of QLCS tornadoes, and now we're expecting the Weather Service to issue tornado warnings based on these things? When our knowledge base is so low, we don't even know what threat that is. Go ahead. Anybody know this day? This is up in Rogers Park up in Minnesota. A couple people died on this one. This day, there was this couple of big supercells down in northern Iowa, southern Minnesota. And up here near Minneapolis, Albert Lee or something like that, a little QLCS that they missed. No tornado warning. And I remember the next day we were in class, and I'm like, oh, pull up the data. Let me see what it is. Oh, there it is. I saw it. Why did I see this vortex? I saw it because I was looking for it. The people who were there were looking down at these big supercells. They had a severe thunderstorm warning, a blue box out for further north, but they were looking for this big tornadoes down south, missed this because it showed up in one volume scan before the tornado hit. That's a tough, tough job. Here's one of the ones. Look at this. This was a cool thing that we learned in the BOECA workshop, that sometimes you get this broken line, and it creates sort of this little S, a broken S, and there's a tornado in there, behind the leading edge convective line. Totally in rain. I don't know who would have seen it. I don't even know if it's a tornado. It's just a vortex that does damage. And you've got all this other big leading edge thunderstorms and squall lines and wind damage, and you've got a tornado there. What are you supposed to do? Are you supposed to do what Gino does every day? Tornado warn everything.
Hey, it's not every day.
Not every day. I didn't mean every day. I was a little excited, Gino. And then what do you say to the public? How do you say that? See, that's what I have a hard time with. A tornado warning seemed to be appropriate for this entire line, because in your thinking, there's all these transient mesovortices all along the line. I don't know where anything's going to be, and I know that they could spin up in a matter of minutes, in a matter of seconds. Is this the one you were talking about?
December 31st.
Don't know when this was.
Then yes, it was. No.
I think this is the one that Gina was talking about. Look at all this big lines of storms and almost isolated supercells. You want to do an interesting discussion? We should do a debate on what a supercell is. For 15 years we've been debating what's a supercell. Do you know Eric Rasmussen, one of the lead authors of the Vortex 2? His comment is, I don't know, but I know it is. I know what one is when I see it. But we can't define these things. Jeff Trapp was talking about how if it's embedded within a line, it can't be a supercell. And I remember going, what? What are you talking about? And he's clarified that position. It's a great position. It's a lot of fun to argue. But how do you do this? Look at this. Look at all the big hail reports. And then this huge swath of wind damage coming across St. Louis. And then as we get into Illinois, now it starts to produce little tornadoes. And that, well, it's a strong F2. That's pretty good. How do you do that? Gino's going to talk a little bit about what the Weather Service is doing. Some of the things that they are going to do, or have already kind of transitioned to, is that you do a storm-based warning rather than a county warning. Right? You don't warn the entire county. You warn for the storm and the trajectory of the storm. And there's a big push for probabilistic warnings. And I think most scientists who are out studying this think probabilities are the better way to do it, not deterministically. There are benefits and liabilities with these things. I mean, does this look cool or what? 30-minute threat probability, 1 hour swath of accumulation probability, and estimated time of arrival. That's great. You're driving in your car and you turn on the radio and they're giving you a probabilistic warning. What do they say to you?
And how
This is great if I'm looking at a computer and I'm kind of a geek and I'm looking at a map and I go, oh, I'm right there. But how do you convey that to somebody who doesn't really pay attention to weather and it's just out there driving their car?
And how often do you update it?
And
is it updated every volume scan?
Exactly.
And if it's updated every volume scan, then your probability is changing dramatically with each volume scan.
How do you do that in weather radio? Every 2 minutes you have to re-update that? I mean, it's great and it's flashy. I shouldn't make fun of Gilbert, but I do. I should make fun of Gilbert?
Yeah.
I mean, we get into some great discussions with Gil about these type of things. When you are a weather geek, like a lot of you are, you think that everybody knows the way it is, the way you think. But they don't. Talk to some people who know nothing about the weather. They don't know anything about the weather. Some people don't have any idea how to read a map. It's giving them this flashy information, not so good. So what I suggest is this. Warnings should be issued based on the threat level, not the event type. I think there should be 3 levels of risk. I'm making this up. I made it up today, so there you have it. With wording that stresses the threats. The threats and the call to action are going to be based upon the threat level, not the event. And the emergency response, and this is what concerns me the most, is I can respond based on the threat. If it's a low threat, I don't care what it is, I'm not going to do something. If it's a high threat, I'm going to do something. So let me just throw some ideas. And I'm making, like I said, I'm making this up. So I don't really care what you call it. I'm not married to anything here. The National Weather Service has issued a significant severe weather warning. Boom. What do you do this for? Marginally severe wind and hail. You get hail to 1 inch in diameter, you get winds 50 to 60 miles an hour, put out a significant severe weather warning. Maybe you're going to get some weak tornadoes. I mean, Gino, I don't think you were expecting a strong or violent tornado with that event. Just, there could be tornadoes, and you know how people are when something goes down and you got to have that tornado warning. The main threat would be slight damage to property. When you looked at the Downers Grove tornado, there were trees down. There were trees down where the tornado was. There were trees down where the tornado wasn't. It didn't look that different. It's a little bit more intense. But still, it was just property damage. The risk, or what other risk? People exposed to the elements. How about those people in Indiana with the stage that collapsed? Right? Those people need any severe weather. There's a risk. If there's winds to 50 miles an hour and there's a stage coming down, they got to get people out of there. So the call to action is needed for those who are driving involved in outdoor events, or maybe some other place where a minimum severe weather threat is significant. And we can relax on the criteria. We don't even have to think of how big is the hail, how big is the wind. Just go, hey, this is going to cause some damage. Maybe aerially it's going to be bigger. It won't be that intense. But if there's anybody out driving, they need to watch out for it. Then we move to the next step. An extreme, again, I'm making this up, extremely dangerous weather warning. Now we're talking about maybe significant hail. Hail that's tennis ball size, baseball, softballs. Or maybe we're going to get golf ball hail that's going to cover, 3 miles across, so that it's a major hailstorm. Now we get tornadoes that are associated with well-defined supercells. We've had persistent rotation. Don't kid yourself, no matter what you hear on stuff like storm chasers. Oh, I bet you there's a big violent wedge. I think that's all they ever say. These idiots don't know what the hell they're talking about. When you see rotation, yes, you can say, I bet you there's a tornado. We don't know what kind of tornado that's going to be. We don't know whether it's a wedge or if it's going to be like Ellie, Manitoba. We just don't know that kind of information. But if I have a supercell with persistent rotation, then why not call it an extremely dangerous weather warning? I don't care what kind of tornado it is. I've got widespread wind event. that thing coming through St. Louis, that's going to be devastating. So let's hype up the warning level a little bit more. You can have a stronger call to action statement. And I like these actions as delimiters of the go or no-go decision tree. I'm not going to send everybody to shelter with just a minimal warning. But with a moderate warning like this, I'm going to send people away. I don't have to think about it. What if I had multiple severe weather impacts? I know there's people who go, okay, here's the tornado warning, and then just a couple miles north there's going to be large hail because that's the paradigm of your supercell. And then there might be some stronger winds further to the north, and I'm trying to isolate these things, right? And it gets really confusing. This is a tornado warning, and then over here it's severe. And then we go to the next one, a catastrophic severe weather warning, or whatever. Reserve that for the high-end events, for the Joplins, the Tuscaloosa's, the Plainfields. Although I don't even know if Plainfield should have been. So when you're expecting the strong and violent tornadoes, the Greensburg tornadoes, then you've got something that says, dude, when this happens, bad stuff's going to happen. Widespread and extremely significant wind damage. Does it matter whether it's straight line winds or tornadoes? No, you're not calling it that. You're calling it based on the threat level. If you've got a tornado, maybe it's you don't think it's a super strong tornado, but it's moving through the heart of downtown Chicago, issue this. You're going to get plenty of reports of damage, and there's going to be so many people affected, you'll come out looking good. Any area with an outdoor large venue, maybe you're sitting there going, man, it's going to hit Iowa State's football field like it did a couple years ago in November. That might be a reason to get people out of there. It's hard to ignore something that's that much of a threat. And then you get rid of that slightly confusing tornado emergency. You base it on the threat level. So in summary, you're basing it on the threat level, not the event type. I think the National Weather Service would be more apt to issue warnings in marginal situations. There wouldn't be so much panic where they're going, should I warn or shouldn't I? False alarm? I don't know. You could issue warnings without causing a great deal of social disruption, like at a school or a hospital. And you could reserve the stronger wording for more significant events. Warnings could be varied based on the time of day and the demographics. The Evansville tornado overnight, that was a sizable tornado. Maybe they needed to up that warning because it's at night. Wake people up out of their slumber. You could have language that would already exist for the high-end events. You wouldn't have to make it up as you go along, which is what tends to happen now. Weak, short-lived events, they don't pose much threat. The reality is they don't. Unless you have a trampoline in Bolingbrook. But if you could put out some sort of a warning like this, then a forecaster wouldn't have to sweat out the small details. Is it too strongly worded? What am I doing? Tornado warning, severe thunderstorm, who cares? Now the verification would have to be revamped. But personally, I don't really care about verification. That's the bureaucratic job. The warnings would reflect our better understanding of the severe weather processes, not something that happened with isolated hook echoes in 1958. So that's my pitch. I'm going to let you say what the Weather Service is doing, and then I want to open it up and let you guys scream or shout or debate or whatever.
I guess I'll take my Weather Service hat off for a minute. You knew that wouldn't last long. Did you ever see the movie My Cousin Vinny?
Yes.
Everything that guy said is bullshit. No, I'm kidding. No, I guess the one thing that as I go back, there was a lot of stuff in here that really gave me a lot of heartburn. A lot of heartburn. I don't want to forecast impact. I can't do that. I don't know if there's a Little League game with 8 people outside deserves just as much of a warning and just the same level of service as a Bears game or whatever. So in populated areas, yes. Will the impact be greater if an F2 tornado hits a populated area versus a home? Yes, but the taxpayers deserve the exact same level of service for the mobile home in Podunk, Bumblescum, Alabama, as they do in Downers Grove, Illinois.
Well, I don't think I believe you. Because I've talked to you about this before. And you go, I wouldn't issue that if it were out in southern DeKalb County, but now that it's going through Chicago at rush hour, I'm going to put out a different warning. At least I thought you said that.
No, I'd be lying if I were to say that stuff's not in the back of your head somewhere. But in reality, that's not when I'm training radar operators, that's not what I'm training them, and that's what I tried really, really hard not to do, is take that into consideration. You know what's going on, you know it's going to be worse in an area, but if in a marginal event, I think there's probably some radar operators who would say, that's just 1-inch hail, I'm not going to worry about it in southern DeKalb County, but I know I'll get 20 million reports as it goes over DuPage County. That probably goes in that probably gets weighed in. But if you're talking about a potential tornado, I don't think that really, that shouldn't get considered at all.
If that event that you warned for in June had been out in some of the rural areas of Putnam County, or Bureau, Iroquois, whatever, those areas out there, would you have put out the tornado warning?
Yes, I did.
Oh, okay.
I mean, if you look back, there was the big tornado warning for Livingston and LaSalle County, and it might have had 3 counties in the warning, but it's the same thing. It was a huge area, and it's not.
You would agree, though, that people do warn based on the demographics of the area for the warning.
Just look at a tornado emergency.
That's a southern region mandate. If it's hitting an urban area, call it a tornado emergency.
Well, that's up to each office, but where do you see tornado emergencies are rural Kansas?
That is, I will say that if you, observational evidence would say that, yes. I will tell you from a personal standpoint, that's not true. And if you, March 12th, 13th, 2006, I put out a tornado emergency for southern Wright County in southern Missouri. Southern Wright County probably has like 0 population. I mean, it literally is a bunch of Amish buggies, and that's all that lives there. And I put out a tornado emergency because we had a confirmed large tornado go through southern Springfield, and it was, to me, a tornado emergency, it's just as much an emergency as it is for the Amish, even though they don't have any electronic things to hear the tornado warning, as it is for
Sirens.
Well, in theory, yeah, but
Right.
Yeah, I don't. This is such a, this whole issue is really, really, really complicated, to be honest, because there's so many levels. The probabilistic warnings, I think that's fantastic. I think that is something, and maybe I'm becoming old when it comes to weather service and forecasting, but I struggle seeing how that could operationally work. To me, that's almost an area where I could see like a Mike Smith or the private sector really taking off and working with that more than, I'm just thinking of the operational environment of a weather service office with the limited staffing and the 20 million things to do. There is definitely users who desire that, but we're not there yet, number one. I guess, I don't want to say we're not there yet. We could do it, but the amount of work would be so huge to try to actually keep up with it. What's difficult is I think the National Weather Service needs to, in some respects, they're forced to cater to the lowest common denominator. You talked about polygon warnings. Polygon warnings was a huge step forward, and I think it's a good thing. I enjoy doing polygon warnings more than county warnings in some respects. Unfortunately, with polygon warnings, and this is what I was starting to talk to you about earlier, was the Paducah office. They started looking at it, and they started looking at Jasper County, Missouri. And I might be off by 1 or 2 on these numbers, but apparently Jasper County, Missouri, between 2007 and 2010, were under 28 tornado warnings in 4 years. Because you talk about like warning fatigue and, the sirens go off all the time, blah, blah, blah. Between the 20 years prior to that, from 1986 to 2006, they were under 25 tornado warnings. So since the advent of polygon warnings, suddenly you've got to splash like 5 polygons in a county, and then you've got your dispatcher. Well, every time I get a polygon, I got to sound the sirens again. I can recall, and I can't remember the exact date because I don't do that, but there was an event in Cook County where I think there were 2 or 3 tornado warnings at once, and I was working the event, and it was a nightmare. Polygon warnings are fantastic for the Gilberts, for the people who can display polygon warnings and understand them, but you go to, a county with a volunteer emergency manager with 0 budget, and they have no use for a polygon warning. If that polygon clips northern Ford County sets off all their sirens. And do you guys do that in DuPage County, or do they actually target sirens?
Well, like for COD, we've adjusted the software that our GPS coordinates are matched to the GPS of the polygon. And if it's not here, we don't go to warning. I mean, we've had people who are, they're kind of ignorant. They complained. There was a couple years ago when a storm came through and there was a tornado supposedly in Oak Brook, and it came through and we were right on the very western edge of it, And I'm telling people, we don't need to do this. You know, we don't need to. The storm is already to our east. And a lot of people are like, well, we should have anyway. And it's like, well, then why do you have skill? So I think it's tough. Something that you talked about, though, as far as the demographics, when you go to SPC site and you go to their mesoanalysis page, you can overlay the population centers. So obviously, SPC, when they're putting out watches or outlooks, they're aware of the demographics. And I think, Walker, you're right. Western Kansas, I don't care. Oh, Montana, that's nothing. It's not the same. It's based on the amount of people.
I'm not going to lie to you and say that doesn't come in. I can tell you you guys remember the June 30th supercell that came off the lake, like moving south-southwest? We got a watch for like 5 counties. And we literally, the SPC forecaster who was on literally called me up. He's like, well, what do you think? I'm like, well, I think there's a significant severe threat, but it's over a very small area and over a short time duration. He's like, well, if it wasn't Chicago, I wouldn't do it, but I'm going to put out a watch. Okay. I mean, and realistically, how many times do you see one supercell traversing, western Kansas, and there are leads at SPC who will just let one go because it's isolated and short time duration. But, well, if it's going to hit a big city, you got to have, and I can kind of see that. I mean, we actually had a water spout with that, and, baseball-sized hail. So
well, there was once, there was a big, long-lived supercell tracking across southern Missouri, and it was out any of the risks, and SPC put a slight risk around it, just a small box. And I'm like, isn't that really a high risk? I mean, the percentage of that box it's going to get severe in that box everywhere. So.
Right. I don't know. Well, I guess I'll talk a little bit about this.
Talk a little bit about your stuff, and then we'll open it up.
Yeah. There's not a whole. I guess I'll show you. There's a team that's put together after Joplin, Missouri. There was the service assessment came out, and a bunch of the people who were interviewed, the residents said, "Well, oops, that's yours." They said, "Well, the sirens sound all the time, and so we don't do anything. We just ignore it." So the Weather Service put together a team to kind of look at some possible future ways. And so basically there's a team, and there might be an experiment sometime next spring where they look at different ways of doing things, and it's kind of along the lines of what you're talking. They have no idea, these are literally just ideas that are being tossed out there right now. There's nothing official, there's no set plans. But right now the current severe weather products that we put out, significant weather alert is for less than 1 inch hail and less than 50-knot winds. And that's an SPS. SVR is for greater than 1 inch hail and greater than 50-knot winds, open-ended. So whether it's 100-mile-an-hour winds or 1 inch hail, it's the same warning. And then tornado warning, any tornado. So one possible design that's been thrown out there is do significant weather advisories for 1 to 2 inch hail and 50 to 65-knot winds. And severes for like greater than 2 inch hail and winds 66 to 96 knots. And then severes would also cover EF1 and EF0 tornadoes. And then you'd put out tornado warnings for EF2 through EF5. Another design that was thrown out there is maybe an SPS for anything less than golf balls, anything less than 75-mile-an-hour winds, and then severes for greater than golf balls and greater than 75-mile-an-hour winds. And then QLCS and non-mesocyclone tornadoes are covered with severes, and then mesocyclone tornadoes are the ones for tornado warnings. Another design they're talking about is severes, which I left at a SIG weather advisory, but that should be severe thunderstorm warning for greater than 1 inch hail, 50 to 75 knots, and then EF0s. And then an extreme thunderstorm and tornado warning for greater than 75-knot winds, and then EF1 to EF5, and then tornado emergency for EF3 to EF5. So those are some things, and they're still looking for ideas, and they're just kind of kicking stuff around. The problem with a lot of this is that, well, there's a lot of problems. I can see the desire to do that, but what do you do? How do you handle it? From an operational standpoint, I can't look at a supercell and tell you that's going to be an EF1 or an EF4 tornado. And realistically, the EF scale is a damage scale. It's not an intensity of a tornado scale. It's an intensity of the damage done by the tornado. So in reality, if I'm looking at, and we have Google Maps, you can overlay that, and I'm looking at a storm that I think is producing a wedge, what would be an EF5 if it hits something tornado in the middle of Kansas, that's going to be an EF1 or an EF0. So therefore, it's just a significant weather alert because it's not going to hit anything. So now we start to get to more, we're trying to forecast impact in a very, the way I describe working severe weather, and if you've never been in a National Weather Service office during a really busy event, as a radar operator, you're sitting in front of the radar, and it's like 5 firemen standing there with hoses blasting information at you at full speed, and you've got to make decisions while that's going on. It is really, really, really challenging. I love it. Don't get me wrong, it's an absolute blast, but You're getting tons of phone calls or spot reports coming in. You're getting constantly new radar data. We've got 3 different radars we're looking at now with the terminal Dopplers when storms are coming into the metro area. Phones are ringing off the hook. You've got bosses standing over your shoulder. What do you think about this? Do you think this is going to be this? And it is really, really, really intense. So to try to, and I don't want to, I'm not against doing more, and I'm not against being able to offer more services, but I don't feel comfortable getting to the point where I could say, yes, I think this is going to be an EF2 tornado versus an EF0 tornado. I don't know. We're not that good. Unfortunately, there's definitely a desire for it, and a lot of those plans talked about having like the, basically like a 3-level system. The problem with the 3-level system is that most, I don't want to say most, a lot of emergency managers now basically sound sirens for like greater than 70 or 80 mile an hour winds, hurricane force winds, as well as tornadoes. So if you do that, now you're sounding sirens for like 2 different levels of warnings, the extreme severe warning or the high-end severe warning or whatever you want to call it, plus you're also sounding sirens for tornado warnings. So if you're getting siren fatigue already in Joplin, Missouri, imagine when you add another level of warnings and you're putting out warning, well, this one might produce 75 mile an hour winds, and now you're sounding sirens even more. I don't know what the answer is. We actually had a discussion about this today before I left the office. I don't know what the answer is. I know, I think the job that I do when I'm working a severe weather event is to put out the warnings and try to provide as much information in the most timely manner as possible, and hopefully the most accurate information. The other part of the job, and I think this is kind of where a lot of the work you've done, Walker, is the societal impact, is how do you, when I'm working, it's too late for me to do anything. I can't educate people when I'm putting the warnings out. It's just putting the information out. I think there needs to be something in between to educate people. Then the next question is people are educated. I mean, the analogy I use is I'm educated to know that I shouldn't speed. I'm supposed to go 55 miles an hour on the expressway. There are people to enforce that. I know that. I make the choice to not go the speed limit. I make the choice to go 80. That's my choice. It's a personal choice. We put out a tornado warning. We tell people to go to the basement. People know to go. I mean, I don't think there's anybody out there who doesn't know with a tornado warning you go to the basement or a closet. They make the choice to go outside and look. They make the choice to hop in the car and grab their video camera and go taping it so they can get a viral video on YouTube. People make that choice, and everybody makes it every day. I can't control their choice. I can provide them with the information that's needed for them to make the best choice possible, but it's their responsibility to make the choice. I think our responsibility is making sure they're educated to know what to do and how to interpret the information. Then I'll shut up after one last thought. I'm very leery.
Change it, number 3.
I'm very leery about, I think we need to be very careful about making changes to our warning system. People already, like you said, don't know the difference between a severe thunderstorm. They don't know the difference between a hurricane and a tornado. We need to keep it as simple as possible to cater to the lowest common denominator. If we're going to change it, boy, we got to be careful. I mean, you look at the Homeland Security 5, okay, well, today's an orange or a level 3, and now it's a yellow. Well, what do? I'm at the airport. It's a yellow, and now it's an orange at the airport, but a yellow on the highway. Keep it simple. We really got to keep it simple. But at the same time, you're absolutely right. An EF0, I can look at a storm and know that the storms we were looking at, the big tornado warning box, does not pose the kind of threat as the supercells in Alabama and the supercell in Joplin. Certainly, any meteorologist has a skill to tell you that, but how do you handle it? And we don't really have the tools in our tool belt, so to speak, or the products to handle it properly. But at the same time, I mean, we kind of do to make it simple, but I don't know. It's a complicated issue, so now I'll shut up.
Let's get we have some of the mics here. Just that one? Okay, so are there questions or people have comments? I'd like to get more people involved in this and give us your thoughts or questions or comments.
Here, Paul, and I'll talk while I was there.
Well, this is for the tape. Can you pass it back? Just so they can hear it.
Well, Paul talked about non-weather gurus, and Gino wanted to keep it simple. I think that there's a catalyst between the Weather Service and the public, and that would be the media. And if there was some really involved additional ways of putting out watches and warnings, maybe some of these media people who are just weathercasters may not really even be able to decipher it and express it properly to the general public. I think that would be a concern too.
And that's a really good point. After this event, there was a lot of discussion about how big the tornado warnings were and how long they were and how many areas they covered. And that's actually one of the conversations that Jim Alsop, our warning coordination meteorologist, had. We had media. He basically sent out a message to all the television media and throughout our CWA, or who cover parts of our area. And the question was, what do you think about this? Handling like EF0 spin-ups and QLCSs with severe thunderstorm warnings, and handling maybe a high-end severe thunder. Basically, kind of asking them, how would you like us to handle stuff? The overwhelming answer was, don't change. Leave it how it is. If it's a tornado, it's a tornado, and do not get cute with stuff. We don't want to make it more complicated. You're right. They don't want to deal with it. They want a red box, a yellow box, and be done with it. And it's the same thing with winter storms. We have winter weather advisories and snow advisories. They get really upset if there's a winter storm warning here and a winter weather advisory there. Why can't it all just be one thing to make it simple? And
I just, when you do that, though, if it's a tornado, it's a tornado. Well, we're redefining what tornadoes are. There's a reason that statistically the EF0 and EF1 tornadoes have increased. We're just more aware of them. They made a big deal about the outbreak in the southeast this year. It's the biggest outbreak on record. And I'm telling you, do you think there was fewer tornadoes on the 148 day back in April 1974? My bet would be that there was a lot of the weaker tornadoes that spun up that were never accounted for in any of these surveys. You wouldn't have gotten the reports of the EF0s and the EF1s. The tornado in Downers Grove, reality, it goes in the statistics as a tornado. It could have easily been not. We could have just said, it's just wind damage. And no one would have known, and it wouldn't have made a big difference. There's no video of it, no pictures of it, nobody saw anything. We just saw it's some rotation. There's some sort of vortex in a wind damage field. It must be a tornado. So I just think we're far more aware of it. So when you have that knowledge, and you're looking at terminal Doppler radar, and we're looking at Doppler radar, you're going to see things, and you're going to look for tornadoes that 20 years ago, when this system was developed, would never have been thought of. So to keep it exactly the same is to kind of give in to the fact that our understanding has changed. Our definitions are changed. Not all tornadoes are alike. And I think, to be honest with you, I think the strong and violent tornadoes are far more important than the little weak spin-ups. Anybody who's been out...
The challenge operationally is trying to distinguish between the two. In a squall line, 95, 98% of them are probably going to be EF0, EF1, and not that significant. But you get your occasional EF2 and even an EF3 now and then, and that's significant. And the other problem is that an EF1 is significant to a mobile home park. Is it significant to Downers Grove? There's trees down, big deal.
But statistically, we've seen more EF0s.
Oh, yeah.
So why? What does that mean?
Well, a lot of you people are out there chasing and finding tornadoes we don't want you to.
Or actually, it's not me. If it's anybody else, there's dust underneath the storm. Must be a tornado. Let's call it in.
Not if I don't have it out. Not if I said I'm not going to chase that EF0.
You want to give a comment? You're Mr. Social Sciences. I like. This is Walker Ashley from Northern Illinois University.
Who?
I say the same thing. First off, I think CTAs, the call to action statements, are stupid. It's too late. Get them out of the warning. There's no point to tell somebody in a mobile home to go jump in a ditch. It's a little too late probably at that point. If we're telling people to go get in their closet or to go get in the basement. I agree with your storm-based warnings. It's the only thing that it's good for right now is for us nerds and for people who have GR. For most of the people that it's trying to protect, it really doesn't matter at this point. It's all county-based still. Even in places like DeKalb, where we just get clipped, we'll still sound all the sirens. And Gilbert's partly responsible for that.
Gilbert, if you're watching, I'm sorry, man. You should have been here. That's all I'm saying.
I don't know about the gradations of threat and slicing it up, salami slicing warnings. I think the system works pretty good. We've had over almost 600 fatalities this year with tornadoes, but those were extremely violent tornadoes. And before that, we were hovering in the upper 50s, low 60s of fatalities per year. That is pretty amazing, considering the violent weather that we do get in this country and the tornadoes that do hit highly populated and not so populated areas. I think the system has collectively, especially since the 1960s, worked pretty well. And I make a living off of looking at the bad stuff. That is the costs and looking at casualties. So I would argue that we've done a pretty good, or the Weather Service in particular has done a pretty good job, and we need to start from that vantage point and not trash the system that's already there. I have a big problem with the Weather Service verifying their own stuff, their own warnings, and so they're more inclined to go look at the spin-ups in Downers Grove or wherever it was and call them tornadoes when I would completely disagree. I don't think they are tornadoes. And I have seen some QLCS tornadoes, and let's just say they aren't visible. You don't have condensation down to the ground. I saw one of those the same day of the Boy Scout event in western Iowa. They're not very visible, and I don't even know if I would consider them tornadoes, like eddies. But it was throwing some stuff around. I guess it's like, what is a tornado? It's not as simple as we think it is. This team that you're talking about, and I'm sorry, I'm just going to run down my points so I can get off this stage. This team you're talking about, is it just meteorologists?
I don't know.
It's like a secret group.
I actually just heard about it a few days ago. So
okay, I think this is where the Weather Service is doing a disservice to the country, and I say that in a nice. I should say it in a nicer way. I just gave you a lot of credit. So the Weather Service needs to look at the social sciences, and that is realize that meteorologists aren't psychologists, they aren't sociologists. They're not trained, and they're not even engineers, and they're going out there and doing damage surveys. I'll let you slide on that one. But we need to, in the Weather Service in particular, the brass in DC and Silver Spring, need to hire, or at least acquire consultants, psychologists. I can think of a number of very prominent scientists out there who have done warning science for a long, long time. And the stuff that you see in the Joplin survey, which was very good, that's been known for a long period of time. And it's the sociologists and psychologists that have studied this stuff for ages, and they do have some of the answers. And I think that the Weather Service needs to realize that physical scientists, in particular meteorologists, are not schooled in that. And I think this top-down sort of policy of saying this is the way it's going to be done just because that's what the Washington brass think is the wrong way to go about it. And I think you'd find a lot more value out of asking or doing group-based surveys and whatnot of people that employ your warning information to see how it could be better utilized, rather than just kind of guesstimating because we're meteorologists and we think we know it all.
You know, Harold Brooks at the last Severe Storms Conference made the comment, when you look at statistics of how many people are dying, especially in deaths per million, that the numbers are so low that his thing is, we are not going to save any more lives from a scientific standpoint. Meteorologically, we're not going to save lives. Sociological advancements will save lives. But from a science, we're just not going to do it. And it may be one of those things where we shouldn't invest money into improving the science of it. Where we are may be good enough. Of course, that was before this year, where so many people died. And now maybe the science is, personally, I think the science has gotten a little ahead of itself. We're so quick to make warnings that we can't distinguish between the serious events and the small events, and we can't expect people to know the difference. We know the difference, but our words don't say that. They don't convey that same meaning.
Yeah, and I think we could take the $13 to $15 million that we spent on Vortex 2 and get a lot more value out of it. I mean, we're not going to add 5 minutes by throwing a couple of mobile Doppler radars out there. We're not going to understand a lot more. And that whole platitude of we're extending warnings are going to provide more lead time was laughable. But that's how you get money to do that sort of grant work. I think that 13 or 15 million could have been spent very wisely on maybe something like this, asking the more difficult questions on warning science. But that stuff's not sexy. I mean, that's just the reality of it. I don't know if I have any more. I am big on the responsibility. There's a lot of ignorant people out there, and there's a lot. You can't educate stupid. I mean, there's what more do you need to do? And I always say, we're not going to come knock on your door and tell you to get in the basement. In fact, we're already doing that through weather radio, but less than 5%.
We're doing that with texting.
Right? I
mean, the COD wants, and they have what they call the rave alert.
Yeah.
If there's a warning, every student gets it. So everybody's, there's a warning, we should
Yeah.
go for shelter.
You know, you look at the Joplin assessment and it just kind of makes you go, but there were a lot of people that actually did, well, that either did pay attention or were really, really lucky. Maybe a combination of both, but I'm big on personal responsibility, and it's driving, and if you don't put your seatbelt on, you should put your seatbelt on, but there's still, 20% or 15% of the population that still don't put their seatbelt on.
But the reality of Joplin, too, is that a lot of people did do the right thing and still died.
Yeah, and that's going to happen.
Utica was a perfect example. People left their mobile home, went to what they thought was a secure basement that was built on sandstone. The building collapsed. 4 of them died after leaving their home to go to a safer place.
That's going to happen.
It just sucks.
You're not going to get, I wish we could get rid of that, but that's just the way, we can prevent a lot of fatalities, but you're not going to prevent them all. There's just no way.
Talking about the tiered warning system, if you look back at the radar data from Joplin, I don't think any meteorologist would have had the high tier out for that until it was too late. So then if you had a tiered system and you put out your, I don't really mean it tornado warning, nobody's going to really take you seriously, and that almost is the argument. And I know that's an extremely rare case, but that's almost the argument against the tiered system, because by the time you realize that this is a crap storm, it's too late. You're really, really, really too late.
I'm really proud of your language today, Jim.
I'm trying so hard.
I guess if there's one salami slicing that I would do, I would say maybe the Weather Service, and they certainly don't need to leave it up to the CWAs. They need to come up with a consistent tornado, at least regionally, some sort of tornado emergency. I actually think there is some use for the tornado emergency. And I think that it has to be visually identified, whether it be a super trained spotter, not a, well, I'll be quiet. Or a webcam view, which we're getting amazing views out there, and you can certainly even in a lot of cases now follow along with storm chasers, although we know we have these issues with that too. But for example, Joplin was a clear case of where if you had, if you're near Springfield and you have the news on, you could see it coming into town. Finally, as that rain kind of let the tornado be seen, that's a case where you do push the tornado emergency button. I don't see how it could hurt if you have a visual identification of it. I wouldn't issue a tornado emergency solely based on radar.
No.
And I think this is the big issue.
That has happened.
The super resolution stuff is changing everything now, because we are starting to see a whole bunch of things that we never saw before. And a lot of these spin-ups right along the front of the line, they're almost ubiquitous now.
Yeah.
And good luck.
Well, it's funny, when I got to the Chicago office, I think the terminals were just coming online with those, and my first thought when I was watching just an ordinary thunder, like, oh my God, this is a nightmare. How much stuff we're seeing we never knew was there, how many downbursts. It was glorious. The 5-minute data and not knowing, it was much better to have your head in the sand than to see every single microburst that's occurring. It's fascinating. It is fascinating to watch, just like an ordinary squall line to go through, and you get 10, 15 microbursts occur, 2 or 3 at a time. It is fascinating and scary.
Other questions, comments?
I've got a few comments, so I'm going to hopefully list them in some sort of logical order. The first one, and it's the one that affects, that really bugs me the most, is what to do with QLCS tornadoes. And that's been mentioned quite a bit already tonight. I know we at Valpo are doing research with our radar now on the May 25th event. I don't know, Gino, if you heard anything from Eric, that because he's been involved in this too, where this was an event we had about 9 in the morning come through a QLCS of what looked like an innocuous QLCS from any of the NextRad sites, because it had split kind of right in between Chicago, Indianapolis, northern Indiana, central Illinois. And there were a couple reports of tornadoes in central Illinois, then nothing for a long time, nothing through the CWA until all of a sudden the line was passed and Kankakee, Newton County, Indiana, Jasper County, Indiana, all were starting to report damage. And I go out and, because there was another round expected that afternoon, Eric asked if I'd go out and do the survey, since I live out in Lake County, Indiana. And so I had some experience, so I said, sure, I'll go out there. And I expect 3 damage areas, EF0. Are they a tornado? The whole debate, is this tornadic? Is this, straight line wind? Because I had been watching the storms that morning, there was nothing clear on radar that there would be any tornadic or even straight line wind damage whatsoever, and no observations. Obviously, I mean, those are hard to come by at for any storm of a, actually severe measured gust. I ended up finding 3 areas of EF1 damage, an area of EF2 damage, and then the one EF0 area. And the EF2 damage, you had debris spread out over a 1/4 mile width. You had large objects carried hundreds of yards. I mean, some of these objects weigh 150, 200 pounds. And a bunch of very large, newer power poles just completely sheared off. And this was the middle of nowhere, Newton County, Indiana. It hit one farmstead, clipped the house. The house had roof damage, hit the power poles, hit a great couple grain bins in a barn. I mean, but if that thing, I am convinced, if that thing had gone through, say, the Chicago metro or the northern counties in Indiana, Lakeport or LaPorte, somewhere along there, if that thing had gone through a populated area without any tornado warning there would have easily been injuries. I mean, you figure something that's 200 pounds, that could have been a person that was lofted 200 yards into the field. And there was no way you could tell off the NEXRADs that you had strong, significant damage occurring. I mean, you couldn't even decipher an area where there'd be weak damage. So how can we, I guess my first problem is, how can we grade warnings, when we can't even, and of course you're always going to have cases where you can't tell, but when we have significant damage occurring, and we still can't tell that it's happening. I mean, we have, from our Valpo radar, we're studying this event, the velocity signatures, we finally unfolded them all, and there's hardly anything there. I mean, there's a shear zone with a few enhanced areas on there that you could imagine probably being, where a spin-up would occur, and you have small notches in reflectivity.
That's what you said, first of all, with your terminal Doppler, seeing that a lot better because of the higher resolution. But this could be one of those cases where you would actually do a warn on forecast. And I don't know, this, for those of you not familiar with that term, is do you do a short-term forecast and issue warnings based on the forecast? Let's say that we're doing some high-resolution simulations, and we warn based on the forecast. We go, you know what? These storms are going to be really bad. Let's put out a tornado warning now, an hour in advance. Say this is what's going to happen, and that might be a better way to go for some of the QLCS.
But the problem is, from the mesoscale standpoint, trying to diagnose the mesoscale environment that morning, it's late May, May 25th, and you're talking about Cape less than 500. I don't exactly associate low instability, high shear events in late May at 9 in the morning.
You should.
I mean, apparently, but it's just, it's one of those things where you cannot in any way, shape, or form blame somebody for missing that. Because who wouldn't? I mean, and the reports didn't start coming in until an hour after the event.
Right.
Yeah, Gino, if you have a comment.
I wasn't working that day.
I wasn't working that day. That's yes, Gino. I wasn't working that day. If Gino were working that day, there would have been a tornado warning out for the entire state of Indiana.
Yes, there would. I would have went to North Webster's area.
But I guess that kind of leads into my other point. And you mentioned your tier of warnings and how they'd be roughly broken up. And a lot of weight is, and maybe rightfully so, is placed on events where you're going to have huge areas impacted. And I mean, obviously, when it comes into the media, it becomes a big national story if a derecho goes through Chicago and takes out power to 1 million customers. That becomes a national story. But to a resident's in a resident's mindset, what is going to stay in their head longer? Images of 100-mile-an-hour winds taking out trees, taking out shingles and maybe a little bit of your roof, or if you had an EF4 go through the metro. I mean, people still, it's general public still talks about Plainfield. Heck, I mean, growing up in the south suburbs, they still talk about Oak Lawn. People, I mean, people who are not tornado savvy, weather savvy people are talking about Oak Lawn 40 years later, 45 years later almost. So I think, and that's where things with the grading of warnings becomes really confusing. It can get really confusing. Where do you draw those lines? And which leads into my last point, which is about the tornado emergency, which Walker, you brought up. We had tornado alerts up till 1966. Once they started warning in 52 until 66, and then they got rid of them. And why did they get rid of them in the first place? Because you had the watch, the warning, the alert. And unless it was an alert, people didn't do anything. At what point do we have, say for instance, with the Alabama QLCS, the first round on April 27th, where that morning you had a QLCS go across Alabama, and you had 2 tornadoes in that QLCS, one of which was almost rated EF4, another one was a solid EF3, and destroyed a bunch of homes outside Tuscaloosa.
Of course, you do realize that we could argue then whether that's a QLCS or a supercell embedded within a line, because that's another big issue.
I mean, it could be, but then again, I mean, even a supercell embedded, it happens so fast sometimes that, you know, if you're going to have this tornado emergency, people get used to it and expect it for the big tornadoes. And when it doesn't happen, because, say, you have a supercell embedded in line situation, which even those usually don't get, I mean, these were some really intense tornadoes. And one of them was distinctly a QLCS structure. If you look at radar, it was one of those little notches in the line, but it got intense and blew a home off its foundation. I mean, at what point if we make the tornado emergency a standard, you know, a public product, do people expect tornado emergencies for anything that they feel they should take shelter for? And then we have a tornado warning out and a big one happens, and we're back to square one where we were in '66.
Those are great points. Anybody else like to comment? Question? Ken? Oh, here. Oh. Thanks, man.
Thanks. My comment is about the idea of changing your warning standards or thresholds based on the population of the area affected. And it seems to me that it would be a concern, if you're concerned about complacency, that could create problems, because what you're saying is that when a lot of people are going to hear the warning, then you're going to lower the threshold for issuing a warning, meaning that more people are going to hear warnings that then don't verify for them. Well, and so, you know, if you're concerned about creating complacency, I think that would be a concern for adding that factor into your criteria.
I agree. I think what I really meant with the demographics is, let's say that we've got a line of an intense winds system coming through, and it's going through mostly open fields. The damage reports you're going to receive are going to be minimal. When it's coming through the Chicago suburbs, the damage reports you're going to be getting, the affected nature of the number of people, will be more significant. So it will, at least in my mind, it verifies with the public better. So I'm not saying that it's not just a binary, oh, this is more people, I'm going to go with this weak one. I'm saying if I've got a big wind damage event through a larger area, there's going to be more people affected. So it's more the number of people affected, not that a tornado is in a small, weak tornado in a larger region. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Yeah, okay. I think I understand.
You have more point?
Yeah.
Ken?
Well, the thing I was going to say as a follow-up is that this is something that you could model with a sociological model, where you would have, you know, you can model people's behavior based on, you know, what they have heard before in terms of warnings and whether they felt that the warning was warranted or not, and whether they will take action. Their probability of taking action goes up if they feel, you know, warnings are good, and if they feel the warnings are not so good, then their probability of action would go down. And you could, you know, then could create a model where you create a landscape with people on it and put random, severe weather events across it, and model how people's behavior changes over time based on their experience with past warnings. I don't know if that's been done, but that's the sort of information that
I don't think I've ever seen people's
into
response.
a scientific basis for changing your criteria.
And find a way to add like a bias correction to the probabilistic warning based on that?
There are models that evacuation models.
Yeah, and damage.
I think whenever people evolve, and certainly you probably do that, but whenever people are involved, models fail miserably. All you got to do is talk to an economist. But I think that's certainly better than meteorologists kind of dictating the way it should be. At least think about it, and some social scientists actually working on that would probably maybe get more value out of that than coming up with an entire new system or whatever we might do, or trying to implement probabilistic warnings. It's at least worth considering.
Other comments, questions? Evan? Or Eddie?
Just a question about how you get the word out there with like EAS and stuff like that, and some of these things that, I get them passed down through work, and I got one today for the winds, and I rolled my eyes at it, and we had a power outage because of it. But it happens all the time, and it's most of the time I'm like, well, that's stupid. Why are you telling me this? Because I think of things, where I actually need to know about it if, there's a big storm coming that's actually going to do some damage versus like today where I'm like, it's norm for Chicago. This happens all the time. And I get these EAS messages and they don't differ. If like today's, it was like 25 or 20 to 25 mile per hour winds and some other stuff I was just looking at. And, that message will be the same as you have, severe thunderstorms and tornadoes headed your way. And the public, I think, doesn't get it the same way. But when they do, they kind of, like you said, complacency. They don't really look at, it's the same, you look at colors, it's like yellow or red, and it's like, okay, something bad's coming.
Well, I think this is kind of the argument, and that's kind of what I was saying earlier to Gino is, as a meteorologist, as a warning meteorologist, what are you supposed to do? Are we supposed to give the best information based on our experience and what we know? Or are we supposed to be the sociologist and try to figure out how people are going to perceive it? I mean, Gino clearly put out the tornado warning because that's what he thought in his mind was the best scenario. That's what it was. And your statement, and I remember you talking about this, your statement was exactly right. It was called a tornado warning, but what you said about what was going to happen was exactly what had happened. So transmitting information, whose job is that? Is it really the Weather Service's job to know how you're going to use that? Or is it the people who use it that dictate what they want? If you're an emergency manager, Gino's responsibility is to give you the best information that he knows how to give. You have to tell me as an emergency manager, what is it that you want? Why do you want the information? What are you going to do with it?
All right, well, sometimes we do stuff with it, but a lot of times we don't. We just pass over it and go, well, if the alarm goes off, it'll go off, But like sometimes we'll put extra staffing or stuff on, or even alert the hospital. Some hospitals go on bypass,
right?
For different storms and stuff. But it's weird how they do it because chief just decides, well, today I'll put 8 guys on because there's going to be a blizzard, and nothing happens, So.
Walker, it works both ways. We kind of force down what people should hear. But likewise, a lot of people are going, oh, I want this, but they don't know much about the weather. They don't know much about what to do with the actual information we can give them. And that's kind of stuff.
I think one of the things you said, Walker, was we should ask, or basically find out what people need. I forgot exactly how you worded it. The problem is if you take 100 emergency managers, media, public, and ask them what they need, you get 100 different levels of service. And again, it kind of goes back to, you got the Gilbert who wants the coordinates with, probabilities at each coordinate, and you've got Joe in Bumblescum, Alabama, who doesn't want anything more than, do I need to take shelter? I mean, that's the two, and we don't.
No doubt that's going to happen with anything. I mean, we could survey chicken McNuggets or figure out what chicken's the best.
Chick-fil-A.
Everybody's going to have different opinions. It's probably-
Well, objectively, though, you know the, yeah.
As long as it's got Paul Newman's like
So I guess I don't
The
know.
questions are being asked, and I don't think they are effectively right now. A survey on a web page to say, well, how does our display look now, or how does our website look? It's not really the best way for the Weather Service to communicate to the public. And with all the money that's being spent on glossy satellites and radars and great pensions, maybe. I think that a little nugget of that money could be spent on getting some people in there that know a little bit more about that and can do focus group research and know, I don't know how to do it, but know how to pull that information out of complicated scenarios.
I would agree. And I mean, I think it's kind of, I don't know. I don't like being politically correct. I'll just.
You want to pass it to Evan? I feel like we're passing a candle back and forth.
The one comment I was going to bring up, and kind of got discussed a little bit just in the transition there, I kind of like Walker's point about all this, that we really need to know how people respond to it, because that's really what we're after, is warning the people. So you need to know how the average Joe out there interprets the warning. And you know, me sitting here, Paul, you were talking about your idea of sort of graded weather warnings and not distinguishing between severe and tornado and something like that. And I really like the idea, and because I agree with you, you know, one event happening out in a cornfield may not have as big an impact as the same event occurring over the Chicago metropolitan area. But you look at it in a different light, you know, somebody who lives in the Chicago metropolitan area gets a bunch of storms, they kind of would learn, all right, I need to pay attention to these sort of warnings, but the lower ones I don't really need to worry about. But let's say they're out on the road, they're headed west on I-80, they get something on their phone that says, oh, there's a severe, or there's a weather warning, but it's a low grade weather warning. But that turns out to be the same event that they've experienced, you know, in the Chicago metropolitan area that was graded higher. So, you know, they might be driving into something that they think is not that big of a deal, but it's actually the same thing that was a big deal for them in a different area. So there's caveats to all of it. I think we really need to know, you know, how do people interpret what, you know, what comes to them, and how do they get that information?
And what sucks is well, it doesn't suck, but it's a fact is that storms are very dynamic and constantly changing.
Yeah.
And so the more tiers you add, the more of a headache you give me on radar, to be completely honest. Because if you put out a severe thunderstorm warning, I'm looking at this storm, it's gone up quickly, I'm going to put it out, I'm going to go with 60-mile-an-hour winds and quarter-size hail. Fantastic. 10 minutes later, this storm has really taken off. The next SVS I put out, I'm going with golf ball-size hail and 70. In this new tiered system, I've got to go up a tier. 2 volume scans later, the cores come down, it's really started to weaken. It's probably still producing quarter-size hail, but it's not that severe. Do I bring it back down? Do I cancel the oh crap warning to just a oh darn warning? And then do I go back to the oh crap again?
Yeah, but you know what? You just gave a perfect example. We evacuate people based on a warning. If you go changing on a severe statement, we're not going to evacuate. You better reissue the warning, because that's what we respond to. So the same is the instance, or the argument's the same thing. You've got to give us information. I always look at things anyway as error bars. Right? What does it mean to be a 58-mile-per-hour wind? We say, oh, the winds are 60 miles an hour, must be severe thunderstorm. You know that's garbage. You know that it's probably somewhere between about 45 and about 70. So this is our criterion, this is our range. That means half the time we're running underneath this criterion. Why not up it higher, so that when you move the error bars up, even the low end of the error bars are still fairly significant. That's why I've always thought we're way too low on the warning, because half the times we're putting out warnings for something that's not even severe, just because I don't really know. I don't have that kind of accuracy.
Devil's advocate here, or I can't think of the Sugarland concert. That was probably 45, 50-mile-an-hour winds in reality. There was a severe thunderstorm warning out, but you raise that bar and suddenly that gets no warning at all. And you know, you could make an argument that, okay, an event that size should have a private meteorologist there to give them warning, but in reality, that doesn't happen. you know, 58 mile an hour winds. Well, okay, us warning for 58 mile an hour winds that are actually 45 mile an hour winds.
Fine. But devil's advocate back at you.
Okay.
It wasn't severe. Your warning didn't verify, or their warning didn't verify. If it's 48 mile per hour winds.
Damage.
Actually, it was severe. There was a 70 mile an hour or thereabouts wind gust reported in the northwest of the location. So
okay.
The issue with that warning was the pathcast was off by a good 15 minutes. And so one of the debates, I went to the integrated warning team workshop in Indianapolis that I was speaking at. Just happened to be scheduled for, and it was immediately after that. Not a great time to be a speaker. But one of the issues is whether the Weather Service should just remove all pathcasts. And you guys are still doing pathcasts, right?
It is the suggested practice to not include pathcasts, I think, from region and from headquarters. And it's been that way since the tornado that hit in Newton County, Missouri, the one that went south of Joplin.
You mean towns in the path?
What's that? You can list towns, but don't list times.
Oh.
Which...
Although when we did the southern, what was the name of that tornado that hit Chicago? A couple years ago, June, Pachota?
Oh, June 7th?
Yeah, what was it?
I don't know.
Whatever it is.
Oh, Wilmington? The one that went up June, the one that went up
Yeah, the one that you were down Livingston, the
okay,
tornado outbreak. Yeah. So we're in Chicago. We're talking to a guy. Says, oh yeah, they said it was going to hit my town at whatever, 6:17, and sure enough, I look at my watch, and that's when the storm hit. It made a difference to that guy.
And I got to be honest with you, I am one who's, my personal view is I'm going to include pathcasts anytime I feel comfortable doing so. Unfortunately, by nature, the level of experience in weather is going to vary from office to office, the level of severe weather experience, the level of experience and issue. So if you're not looking at and tracking at the outflow boundary from that storm, which is in theory would be probably the better ways to do because that's where the winds are, you're going to have a bad pathcast on it if you're tracking the red blob instead of the outflow boundary. You know, things change speed, things move a little bit, but I'm going to include, until they tell me I'm not allowed to and I'm forbidden to, I'm going to include pathcasts on storms that I feel I can get a good track on. I think by default they're turned off at our office now, but I think when I train the new people, I'm telling them, if you have a level of comfort to do it, include the pathcast, because people eat that. The May 4th, 2003 outbreak, I mean, you heard that over and over and over. Well, they said it was going to hit at 5:40, and at 5:38, there it was. I mean, people love, it matters, and especially when you start going to big lead times. When you're talking about big wedge tornadoes, you know, the long track supercells like the Alabama ones, you want to have, because if I'm putting out a tornado warning for you, the storm's not going to hit for 45 minutes, I want you to know this storm will be in Tuscaloosa at 5:45, even though this tornado warning went out at 4:58. That way you're not, well, there's no storm. They put out a tornado warning. It's sunny. These meteorologists don't know what the hell they're doing.
We have time for one more question or comment.
The thing that I'm just going to say, and kind of talking like what you were talking about earlier, Paul, I think our warning system needs to get revamped. It's old and it's outdated because it was based a lot on how we were able to get out information back in the 50s. We didn't have Twitter, we didn't have the internet, we didn't have Facebook, we didn't have cell phones. We had to issue warnings to people via radio and via TV, and there's 5 TV networks, and nowadays if you're a chaser, you can you got live cams and you're able to broadcast your information a lot easier and a lot more efficiently. And I think the warning systems need to get looked at because of our abilities nowadays to take what we see and then tell the public what we know, and not just based on what we can see with radar, what we can see with our own eyes, and what we actually know.
I think, and maybe I'll use it just as a closing comment. I threw out some ideas. I don't really care if they're good or bad or whatever. I'm not married to them. I'm just here to try to make people think, to consider it. But what I would ask you to consider, and this is maybe why things like Facebook are so amazing, is because they're new ideas. They were brand new. So imagine that there were no warnings whatsoever. We had nothing in place. And you were going to design a brand new system with the current state of knowledge. What would you do? Have you thought about those answers? I fear that we're trying to conform to old things just because it's kind of there. What if you started from scratch? If you had the freedom, how would you devise it? And maybe we need that thinking. So those of you who are meteorology majors, be that generation to rethink it, to be the new weather Facebook. Just come up with a good idea. We don't have to keep the past. It's time to, personally, I think it's time that we could dismiss it. I don't care. So give that some thought. If you guys want to continue having discussion, feel free. Thank you all for coming. Valpo people, thanks for coming out. There's places to go out afterward if anybody wants to go. Sam, Ryan, you guys are in charge of that. I'd like to thank once again Gino Izzi, coming out from the Weather Service. And Dr. Walker Ashley from NIU, thank you for being here and helping. Good comments. Although, no call to action, really?
No, it's too late.
That's interesting. Not always.
Oh, it's way too late.
Well, oh, I know what you're saying. If they don't know by now, it's too late. And then thanks for some of the great comments that you guys had. So thanks for coming out tonight.
I have one announcement.
Oh, yeah.
I'd like to make. For our next AMS meeting here at COD, that will be Monday, November 28th at 7 p.m., same room here. Me and fellow Met Major here, Matt Pachota, say hi. We'll be doing a presentation on the blizzard of 2011 back in February, and I'm hoping to get Paul Merzlock also to be coming out here to help with his expert analysis on that blizzard. So,
one more thing too. We have a discussion board here at College of DuPage, and we've got some people from NIU on it. We'd love to have anybody from Valpo, NIU. We have people from other weather services offices across the country, people from all over on this discussion board. If you'd like to become a member of this, just use your first and last name and signing up, and then I would ask you to use your affiliation. But when we have these big storms, feel free to join in on the discussion. So if you want to do this, go ahead. We'll let you log on and welcome aboard. So that would be cool. Thanks.